Have you ever heard a bell ring when no one touched it? They told me this lighthouse was abandoned, but every night, exactly at 2:15 a.m., the bell rings. And last night, it said my name. I signed the papers on a rainless Tuesday, the kind of gray noon that feels like a held breath. The deed described the property as Lot 14, Harbor Crown Light, an adjacent keeper's cottage, and the realtor called it a passion project. What she meant was that the steps were spongy, the paint was asleep on the brick, and the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse hadn't held a working lens in 30 years. To me, it looked like a quiet place to become someone else. I had left the city the week after packing my former life into 5 storage boxes labeled with a black marker that bled through the cardboard. Books, clothes, kitchen, papers, messy. There was no box for grief. There never is. When people say they need a change of scenery, they rarely mean a crumbling tower and a strip of rocks leaning into a cold bay. But I did. I'd told no one except a cousin who replied with a thumbs up I never opened. The cottage smelled like salt and lemon oil, the way abandoned places do after a single dutiful cleaning months earlier. I carried in a mattress, a small table, a chair, and a lamp. The rest could wait. On the first night I slept with the window cracked and listened to the bass slap the pier and withdraw, patient, like a large animal breathing. The lighthouse stood 12 steps from the kitchen door, a dark rib cage against the sky. In the morning, I found the bell. You don't think about bells in lighthouses anymore. They belong to fog and the old choreography of ships and shoals. But there it was, a bronze throat the color of weathered pennies, hung in a small gabled frame beside the tower. A heavy rope, tar-sticky, lay coiled near the post like a sleeping snake. The clapper looked like a heart. Someone had polished the rim recently. I could see the dull smear of fingers. On the third afternoon, the harbor master stopped by with a binder of local ordinances and a 6-pack of root beer that he said was brewed one town over. He had the soft pink scalp of a man who never bought hats and a laugh that arrived early to his own jokes. "Name's Collis," he said, shaking my hand as if we were already old friends. "People here call me Collie. You're the one bought Crown." "Evan," I said. "Nice to meet you." We stood in the yard and looked at the water the way men do when they're not yet ready to admit they're curious about each other. The pier carried a few gulls, like ideas that had not committed to being thoughts. Out past the breakwater, the ferry to Black Fog Island laid a chalk line across the bay. "You hear it yet?" he asked, too casually. "Hear what?" He nodded at the bell. "Some folks say it rings on nights when the fog comes with its pockets turned out. Old story. The last keeper, this is long before me, said it knows names. That seems unlikely. Everything seems unlikely till you live with it." He smiled. "We do get weather. Don't be shy with the town radio if you need anything. The tower's yours, but the water belongs to all of us." After he left, I ran my fingers along the bell's rim. The bronze was pitted and cold. The rope hung like an invitation I wasn't ready to decline. I tried a small pull, a cautious nudge, just enough to wake the clapper to its hinge. The bell didn't move. That night, the fog arrived exactly at 12. It didn't roll in like a film cliché. It blossomed out of nothing. Thin at first, then thicker, until the world narrowed to the yard in my own breath. The sea vanished with an absence I felt in my teeth. I stood on the porch and watched the lighthouse disappear one brick at a time. Somewhere out there, a buoy rang its 2-note warning. I held my hands in my pockets and said aloud, because it felt right to give the night a name to argue with, "Don't ring." It did not. At 2:15, the phone in the kitchen rang. I didn't know anyone here except the harbor master and the realtor, and neither of them had the number. I picked up. A woman's voice said, "Evan." "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" "The channel is tight tonight," she said, as if we'd been in the middle of a conversation. "You can hear me because the fog is a kind of string." "I think you have the wrong number." "No," she said. "I have exactly the right one. The rope is tied to your house. We share a thread." I didn't speak. The refrigerator hummed as if embarrassed to be noticed. I'm Leda, she said. When the bell rings, I will die. Please don't ring it. I'm not ringing anything, I said, trying to sound patient and failing. I'm in my kitchen. And who are you? The bell knows me, she said, as if that were sufficient. Listen. I heard a second sound then, beneath the breadth and distance of the line. I didn't recognize it immediately. It was a rhythm I knew in my bones before I could name it. It was the bell, very faint, tolling in someone else's air. I set the phone on the counter and walked outside. The fog stroked my face like a wet scarf. The bell stood exactly where it had in daylight, mute, heavy, not moving. For a moment I thought I could see something on the rim, an unevenness brighter than the rest, the suggestion of a fingerprint. When I reached to touch it, the cold bit my skin like a reprimand. I went inside. The line was still open. The faint tolling continued, resolving into a pace, unhurried, inevitable. Where are you? I asked. Close, she said. Right where I've always been. If the bell is quiet, I get another day. If it rings, the water will remember me. I don't understand. You will. The line clicked, gently, like a sigh. I slept badly and woke with the prickly certainty that I had agreed to something without knowing it. The fog had gone, the sky rinsed to a clean blue that made the grass look tender. I walked the perimeter of the yard and then the base of the tower, looking for anything, a seam or a trick, a speaker tucked behind a plank, a wire, a prank. There was nothing. The bell watched me with the blank patience of old machines. That afternoon, I found a book wedged behind a stack of paint cans in the shed. It was a log, the spine cracked, and the cloth worn smooth as skin. The first entries were from 1911 and spoke of light oil, wick trimming, and ships identified by the cut of their sails and the angle of their stubbornness. The handwriting changed through the years the way rivers do. Same path, different water. Near the end, in a clearer and taller hand, an entry from 1989. Crown lantern decommissioned, lens removed, last light shown 003, keepers dismissed, bell to remain by ordinance. Beneath it, in pencil gone faint, a note. The bell rings for those it knows. Don't let it learn you. I put the book back where I found it and told myself that old keepers were just as susceptible to superstition as anyone who worked a night job and needed to explain the sound of their own heart to themselves. The second call came a week later, again on a fog night, again at 2:15. Evan, she said, thank you for last time. I didn't do anything, I said, and hated how defensive I sounded, like a child caught not misbehaving. You did not pull the rope. Most people would test it. You looked and did not touch. That counts. Who are you? I asked, slower. Not your name. Who? I tend to light, she said. That used to be a job. Now I do it because I don't know how to stop. Don't ring the bell. Where are you calling from? Almost here. The line went quiet again, but this time I kept listening. After 2 minutes, I began to hear other sounds braided into the hush, faint as thought. A low voice counting, a fragment of a hymn, a single steady knock repeated with the patience of a tide. It took me too long to realize those sounds were my house. I moved through the rooms following the knock. It led me to the tower door. I hadn't yet climbed the tower at night. I told myself it was because the stair treads were uncertain and I wanted to replace them first. It was fear. This time I opened the door and stepped into the spiral. Brick held night differently than wood or air. It felt closer, more serious. I climbed, hand on the rail, counting, not to mark the steps, but to make noise that was mine. At the landing before the lantern room, I stopped. The door at the top had a small square of wired glass, fogged with its own age. Behind it, something glowed. I opened the door. The lantern room was empty. The old pedestal where the Fresnel lens had stood was a scar in the center of the floor. The glow came from outside. The fog itself was lit, pale and impersonal, the way sheet lightning makes a field look borrowed for a second. I pressed my face to the glass and saw, far out, maybe a mile beyond the breakwater, A second light where no light should be, blinking fast like an eye trying not to cry. I stayed until dawn and then went down and slept foolishly past noon. When I woke, there were 3 missed calls with no message and a voicemail that my phone transcribed into nonsense, as if a pocket of water had tried to speak. On the 3rd fog night, when the phone rang, I answered before the 2nd ring was finished. It felt rude to keep someone waiting who lived in air. I said hello and she said my name, and for a moment we both listened to the same thing. The bell, distant, deliberate. "You hear it too," I said, "even when it doesn't ring here." "Yes." "Where's your light?" "Almost here." "Do you work alone?" "I always have." "Why me?" I asked. "You live with the bell," she said as if it were obvious. "People mistake care for control. You do not. You live beside a thing and you let it be what it is. That is rare." I wanted to laugh and tell her she was wrong about me, that the only reason I didn't try to fix things was that I broke the last thing I loved by putting my hands all over it, but I didn't. The truth is unhelpful to strangers, and strangers with the right voice are not strangers for long. "Do you need help?" I asked. "Not with the water," she said. "With the remembering. When the fog is heavy, everything rhymes. You can forget your own name and find yourself answering to the sea. What do I do? When the bell starts, say your name, out loud, then say mine. Leda. Yes, your voice is a rope." I tried it right then in my kitchen, not because the bell was ringing, but because practice makes a ritual feel earned. I said my name. I said hers. In the quiet after, my mouth felt warmer, as if I'd sipped tea. I realized then that I had not said my own name aloud in days. It was a relief to hear it, like seeing a light in a house you thought was empty. Now, the 4th night, the bell rang here. I did not pull the rope. I never would have. I was at the table, paying a bill that had the gall to be due in a life I thought I had pressed pause on, when the sound grew up out of the yard. A bronze vowel, old and correct. It did not clang. It spoke. It said now. I stood so fast my chair toppled. The room felt too small for my body. The bell rang again, and the 2nd tone carried a taste I will never be able to describe without lying. It tasted like pennies and old keys and waking from a dream in which your teeth fall out and realizing you still have them. I went to the door, and my hand closed on the handle, and that was when I realized I was about to pull it open and run to the bell as if late for a prayer. I let go. I stepped back. I said my name. It sounded wrong in the air, like a word from a language I didn't quite believe in. I said her name. The bell rang again. The phone rang. I didn't plan to answer. I did anyway. "Don't," she said. "Don't go out there. It will learn how you move. If it knows the full measure of you, it will carry you like a note. Stay with me. We can breathe together." We did. She counted in a rhythm that matched the distance between the bell and the waves, and my lungs obeyed. And after 7 tolls, the bell was quiet. My hands were shaking. I told her I was fine. She told me I was not. I believed her. The next morning, there were footprints on the wet boards of the bell platform. Bare feet, small. I measured them with my palm and felt sick. I didn't call the harbor master. I replaced 1 rotted plank and told myself that was devotion enough. Days passed when nothing happened, and I forgot how afraid I was, which is the only way anyone lives anywhere. I painted the kitchen trim, a small act of rescue. I learned the gutters. I looked up the cost of a new lantern for the tower, and then closed my laptop like a door to a room I couldn't afford to enter yet. I saw Kali twice at the market and once at the pier. He did not ask, and I did not tell. Then came a storm that was not fog. The clouds stacked like books you can't lift, and the wind tried to teach the trees how to bow. The radio mentioned a ferry turning back and then went politely silent. By dusk, the water had the flat, ugly look it gets when it has made up its mind about something. The first drop hit at 7, and then thousands agreed. The bell's rope knocked the post like a finger tapping to be let in. At 8, someone knocked at my door. When you live alone in a cottage beside a lighthouse, you imagine knocks that never arrive. You plan your face for kindness and your hands for caution. I opened the door and found no one there. I stepped onto the porch and the rain slashed my arms like nettles. On the top step lay a child's red sneaker with its lace tied in a double knot so neat I felt the memory of a parent's hands. I picked it up and felt, slid into the toe, a folded scrap of paper. It held 3 words I didn't want: ring for me. I stood with the note in one hand and the shoe in the other, and I thought of the bare footprints on the platform. I thought of the bell's patient hunger. I thought of the ferry turning back. I thought of the light in the fog where no light should be. At the edge of hearing, I thought I could make out a voice, high and thin, threaded through the storm like a needle. I did not ring the bell. I brought the shoe inside. I put it on the table. I sat with my head in my hands until the storm's back broke and crawled off to disappoint someone else. At 2:15, the phone rang. I picked up and said nothing. "You did well," Leda said. "There was a shoe," I said. "I think someone wanted me to ring." "Not someone," she said. "Something. The bell is a throat. It learns the taste of grief and offers it back to you as mercy. That's the trap. If I had rung it, you would have fed it. What about the light I see sometimes out there? That is mine. How can there be a light if the lens is gone?" "Light doesn't need a lens," she said very gently, as if to a child who is about to learn a fact that will change his world. "It needs a witness." On the 8th fog night after the storm, I woke from a dream of falling into shallow water and finding no bottom, and the house felt wrong. The wrongness was not in the air, or the old wood, or the yawning stare. It was in me, like a word I used without remembering I had stolen it. I stood at the sink and drank from the tap and tasted the bay. The bell did not ring. The fog felt thick and intelligent. The phone rang. I lifted it. I did not speak. "Evan," she said, "it knows you." "What does that mean?" "It means it can carry you now if it wants you badly enough. Don't go outside. Don't say my name. Don't say yours. What do I do?" "Tell me something that is true about the person you love that no one else knows." I did. I told her the small truth you give to the dark when you need it to leave you alone. She took it into the quiet like a coin and said, "Thank you," without saying thank you. The bell rang once. Every room of the house settled exactly 1 inch lower. I knew then that there would be a night that would require me to choose, and that the choice would be between the small life I had and the larger law the water obeyed. I knew because the bell had taught me what an invitation sounds like. It came 3 days later. I was on the pier at noon, helping Kali coil a hose that had pretended to be a snake, and lost, when the radio on his belt bleated and hissed and found a voice. The voice said the ferry to Black Fog had taken on water after a mechanical failure and was listing toward the rocks. There were 27 souls aboard and a swell coming on. The Coast Guard was en route. Kali said a word I had not yet heard him use and ran to his truck. I stood with the hose in one hand like a prop from a life I wasn't in anymore. By 4, the sky had found its favorite gray. By 6, fog. By 7, the bell rope swung like a pendulum that refused to keep anyone's time. By 8, the phone rang. "Don't," Leda said. "Do not go near the bell." "They're in trouble," I said. "There are children." "I know," she said. "There are always children. That is how this place stays alive. Do not." The bell could warn them. It could carry across the water. It will carry the wrong thing. "Then what is your light for?" I asked, angrier than I intended. "What is the point of a light if it doesn't save anyone?" "To witness," she said. "To remember. To call and answer without dragging anything from one side to the other." "I can't just stand here." "You must." I hung up because I am not as good as she thought I was. I went outside. The fog was a wall with its own weather. I walked to the bell. The rope hung heavy and familiar, like an old friend who wants you to relapse. I wrapped my hand around it. "Don't," said a voice behind me. I turned. Kali stood at the edge of the platform, hair pasted to his skull by fog and sweat and worry. His eyes were old. "You know," I said. "Everyone knows," he said. "Everyone pretends they don't so they can sleep." They need a warning. They have one, he said and pointed at the harbor mouth. Out there, stitched into the fog, a light pulsed fast and clear. It was not the color of a bulb. It was the color of attention. That's hers, he said. You know her? I asked. He didn't answer. He stepped closer. Do not ring that bell. It buys a life with a life. It is an old balance sheet that never learned forgiveness. What if it takes me? I said, half a dare, half a prayer. What if that's how the math works? It isn't, he said. It takes who it wants. It chooses the one it knows best. The rope was warm now. I didn't want to know why. I looked at the light again. It blinked a pattern I realized I could understand without knowing how. A rhythm spelling out a word I knew since childhood because I learned it before I learned anything else. It spelled my name. Well, I let go of the rope. The ferry did not break on the rocks. The Coast Guard met it like old hands catching a falling plate. No one died. The radio said so in a voice that pretended it had expected this outcome all along. Kali clapped my shoulder with a relief that felt like sleep. I went inside. I waited for the phone to ring. It did not. The next morning, there were 2 pairs of bare footprints on the bell platform. One small, one exactly my size. I called Leda at 2:15 because I had learned that if I needed her, the fog would turn the line into a corridor. The bell knows you, she said before hello. It will keep you. What do I do? Leave, she said. Sell the house, burn the rope, forget your own name for a year if you have to. It can't hold what it can't find. I can't, I said, and meant 2 different things. I know, she said. Most keepers can't. I'm not a keeper. You are, she said. You just didn't understand the job. The next days were a study in how the ordinary insists on itself even when the extraordinary is sitting in a chair in your kitchen. Emails arrived. A bill came due. My cousin sent a text full of emojis I couldn't interpret. I fixed a hinge. I bought bread. I slept in pieces. On the 4th night, the fog thickened, but the bell did not ring. The phone did not ring. The light out in the water held steady. A heartbeat you can see. I went to the tower. I climbed. I stood in the lantern room and put my palms on the glass and felt, coming up through the bricks, a shiver that was not wind and not fear. It felt like something making a decision. When I went down, the kitchen phone was off the hook. I hadn't left it that way. I pressed it to my ear. The line was full of the sound of breath. Not one person's breath, many. The bell rang, distant, once, then again, then again. I ran outside. The fog was so dense that the yard became a hallway with no walls. The bell shape slid out of it like a shoulder. The rope was moving left and right in a small, eager arc even before I reached it. I didn't touch it. The bell rang anyway. On the 5th strike, I heard a splash beyond the breakwater, where no one should be swimming. On the 6th, I heard my name, first from the water, then from the air, then from somewhere I hate to admit, from inside my chest, repeated by a muscle that had learned a new word. On the 7th, I saw, at the edge of the platform, the blurry suggestion of a woman in a long coat with her hair braided down her back. Don't, she said. Don't answer. Leda, I said, and the moment I did, I understood every rule she had ever given me and why it existed. The fog took her name from my mouth and made a handle out of it. The bell rang the 8th time and everything in me said go. I went. I stepped off the platform and into a night that became a stair I didn't know the bottom of. The yard stretched the way corridors do in dreams, lengths that do not answer to rulers. I moved forward and every step felt like I put my foot inside a ring that closed behind me. The bell rang the 9th time. The rope brushed my shoulder like a friend. At the 10th, I reached the water. It was not far. It took a long time. I cannot tell you what happened at the edge. Not because it is unspeakable, but because the words I have do not fit things that large. I know I leaned. I know I put my hand to the surface and felt it give and not give. I know something with many small hands reached up and found where my wrist began. I know the bell rang and the water pulled and the light out there flickered as if someone had closed their eyes to make a wish and realized their eyes were already closed. I woke on the kitchen floor with my cheek against cool tile and a taste like pennies and a bruise I cannot explain on my left shoulder in the shape of a mouth trying to learn an alphabet. The phone was off the hook. I picked it up. "You came back," she said, relieved, not relieved. "I think so," I said. "Am I back?" "For now." "What does it want?" "What everything wants," she said. "To be known." "Who are you really?" I asked finally. "Not your voice, your job, your light. Who are you to me?" There was a long silence, not empty. It felt like standing on a dock and feeling an engine out there somewhere turn over once and then decide. "Read the log in the shed," she said. I did. The last entry. I saw it. Turn the page. "I did," I said, annoyed. "It was blank." "Not anymore," she said, and the line went dead. I went to the shed. I brought the log into the kitchen because the light was better. I turned to the last page and saw, written in a hand I recognized because it was mine, words I had not written. "Keeper dismissed. Bell to remain. Witness retained. The bell rings for those it knows. Do not let it learn you. It knows him now." Beneath that, smaller, my name. The floor under my feet felt untrustworthy. I set the book down and opened the back door and stared at the bell until my eyes watered. The fog had lifted. The yard looked like a yard again, which I realize now is the cruelest trick of all. Like, that night I did not sleep. At 2:15, the phone did not ring. At 3, I went to the porch. The sea sounded like a man shaving in the next room. The first gull announced morning. With the light, the fear retreated to its day shape and pretended to be less than it was. I made coffee. I sat at the table. The red sneaker still sat where I had left it, as if waiting. A car pulled up in the lane. I heard 2 doors, voices, Collie and a woman I didn't know. They knocked. I let them in. "This is Vera," he said. "County, mind if we talk a while?" I poured coffee into 3 cups and didn't taste mine. Vera asked polite questions about the night before last, whether I'd heard anything, seen lights on the water, unusual traffic, noise, anything. I answered honestly, which is to say I lied without meaning to, because there are no true answers for the questions that matter. Finally, she set her cup down and opened a small folder. She slid a plastic sleeve across the table. Inside, a photograph. A woman with her hair braided down her back, standing on the deck of a small boat, eyes half closed against the sun, as if she had caught someone saying her name. "Do you know her?" Vera asked. "I've never met her," I said. That part was true. "This is Leda Crown," she said, "great-granddaughter of the original keeper here. She disappeared in 1995, age 31. Boat was found drifting 2 miles off the point. No body recovered." I looked at the photograph until the ink decided to be a face again. "She's a local story," Collie added gently. "People say she talks to folks sometimes. Fog nights. It's a comfort. It isn't always a comfort." "Why now?" I asked, and immediately wished I hadn't, because the way I asked made it sound as if she had been here recently, which only one person in the room would know. Vera closed the folder. "We had a call come in last night," she said. "Woman's voice, said a name, yours, said, 'Tell him not to ring it.'" Then the line went dead. I nodded because my body remembered how. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I don't know what you believe about bells and lights. I only know people go missing here when the weather is thick. Most of them don't ring anything. Some of them think they're helping. You strike me as a man who wants to help." "I don't," I said, and surprised myself with how much it sounded like a prayer. "I want to be left alone." She stood. Collie followed. At the door, she turned. "If you hear her again, tell her Vera says she can stop. She did her part." When they were gone, I sat with the photograph until the room took it from me and made it part of itself. Then I took the red sneaker and the note and the logbook, and I walked to the bell. I pressed the sneaker's toe against the platform's edge and thought of the small bare feet. I set the note beneath the coil of rope and weighted it with a stone. I opened the book to the last page and wrote a sentence I did not understand until I read it back. The bell rings for me. I stood a long time waiting to feel brave and did not. I am not a brave man. I am only someone who bought a house to be someone else and learned that houses are less patient than bells. At 2:15 that night, the phone rang. I answered. "Evan," she said. "Leda," I said, because I wanted the fog to carry us both or neither. "It knows me." "Yes." "It will take me." "Yes." "Will it save someone if I go?" I asked. "No," she said. "It will take you because it is old and because it can. That is all." "Then why do you call me?" "Because you are the only one who listens without asking the bell to love you back." "What do I do?" She did not answer. Instead, she began to speak in a cadence I recognized before I knew the shape of the words. It was the pattern the light had blinked in the fog. A name. Not mine, hers. She said it so quietly that if I had not spent weeks learning the house's breath, I would not have heard it. I said it back. We said it together. I felt something in me loosen that had been bolted to the wrong beam. "Good," she said. "Now when it rings, say it again and keep saying it. And when you reach the door, turn around." "And if I can't, then you will do what most keepers do." The bell rang. It was not any louder than any other time. It was simply correct. I walked to the door. I opened it. The fog stood there with its hands politely folded. I stepped out. The bell rang again. The rope moved. I said her name. I said it again. The third time I reached the platform and my mouth found the habit of another word, the one I have always used to bring myself back to myself. The rope brushed my wrist, and in that touch was every good intention I have ever had, turned inside out. I turned around. I don't mean to make that sound easy. It was not. It felt like picking up a car with my teeth. It felt like saying no to the person you love most in the world and meaning it. But I turned. I took one step, then another. Each step took twice as long as the one before, and if the bell had been greedy, it would have kept me. Perhaps it was full. Perhaps it was bored. Perhaps it preferred the taste of people who run toward it. At the kitchen door, I looked back. A figure stood by the bell, or the fog had a mood. The figure raised one hand as if to say goodbye, or as if to warn me. I couldn't tell which. I went inside. I locked the door. I put the phone on the hook and took it off and put it back on, because the old habits of helplessness are comforting. In the morning, the footprints were gone. The note had softened and taken the words into itself. The rope looked like any rope. The light out in the water was not visible, because daylight makes liars of certain truths. I packed a bag that would have shamed a monk. 3 shirts, a photograph, a knife with a duller blade than my fear. I set it by the door and sat with it for an hour. Then for 2. By noon, it looked like a pet I wasn't brave enough to adopt. By evening, I put the shirts back in the drawer. The harbor master stopped by at dusk with a pie someone's wife had made and told me the ferry would resume its full schedule tomorrow, God willing. He did not look at the bell. I did not look at him, looking at the place where the bell wasn't. At 2:15, the phone rang. I answered because habit is stronger than intention. "Evan," she said. I turned around, I said, like a child waiting for a teacher to put a star next to his name. "I know," she said. "You bought us another week." "Us?" "Me," she said. "And you." "How many weeks do we get?" "As many as we can refuse." I sat on the floor with my back to the door and my feet against the opposite wall and the phone warm against my ear. We said our names together until the house remembered us. We waited for the bell to ring, and when it did, we spoke over it, not to drown it, not to deny it, but to make another sound in the same weather. I don't know how this ends. I could tell you that I listed the house and moved inland and forgot the pattern of fog on brick. That would be a kind lie, the kind you tell a scared child. I could tell you that I rang the bell and the water took me, and you are hearing a voice carried to you through a wire no one can find. That might be true by the time you hear it. Here is what I can say with the plain spine of honesty. The bell rings for those it knows. It knows me. When it calls, I stand in the doorway and I practice turning around. If one night I don't, if one night the fog teaches my feet a different lesson, then the light out there will blink a new name, and someone on a pier will taste pennies and not understand why. And the house will keep my breath in the walls for a while because that is what houses do. And if your phone rings at 2:15 on a night when the weather has hands and a woman says your name, be kind. Say hers back. Count together. The old machines are hungry, but they can be outlasted by simple courtesies. For now, the rope hangs. The bell is quiet. The sea is pretending to be ordinary. I am sitting at my table with a pen I found in a shed and a page that agreed to hold what I have to say. The bell will ring for me. I am learning how to refuse it without pretending it isn't beautiful. If I fail, you will know. You will hear it where you are, faint and correct, and it will sound like a promise with your name on it. Don't come, don't help, turn around, and say her name. Say mine.